Jake Morrison stood in front of the mirror in his small quarters aboard New Geneva Space Station and adjusted his dress uniform one more time. The dark blue fabric felt stiff against his shoulders, but he knew today was too important for anything less than perfect appearance. After 3 years of careful planning and negotiations, humanity was finally meeting the Zephyrian Coalition face to face. Jake had been chosen as the military representative for this historic first contact, and the weight of that responsibility pressed down on him like the gravity of his home planet. The space station hummed quietly around him as thousands of crew members prepared for the arrival of 7 different alien species. Jake had read every report about each species, studied their cultures and customs until he could recite them in his sleep. But reading about aliens and actually meeting them were 2 very different things. He took a deep breath and reminded himself that he had handled difficult situations before. Combat missions, hostage negotiations, diplomatic crises. This was just another job that needed to be done right. Ambassador Lisa Rodriguez had briefed the team yesterday about the importance of making a good first impression. Earth needed allies. Among the stars and the Zephyrian Coalition controlled trade routes that could make humanity wealthy or keep them isolated forever. One wrong word, one cultural mistake, and centuries of human dreams about joining the galactic community could vanish in an instant. Jake left his quarters and walked through the corridors toward the main conference hall. Other crew members nodded respectfully as he passed, their faces showing the same mixture of excitement and nervousness that he felt in his chest. The hallways were decorated with flags from every human nation, a reminder that today represented all of Earth, not just one country or government. Dr. Peter Collins was waiting near the entrance to the conference hall, checking his tablet one final time. The cultural specialist looked nervous, his hands shaking slightly as he scrolled through his notes. Jake understood the feeling. Collins had spent years studying alien psychology and customs, but today would test whether his theories actually worked in practice. Ambassador Rodriguez appeared from a side corridor, her diplomatic robes flowing behind her as she walked with practiced confidence. She had represented Earth in dozens of negotiations with other human governments, but this was her first time dealing with beings from other worlds. Still, she carried herself with the calm authority that had made her famous among Earth's diplomatic corps. The 3 humans entered the conference hall together, and Jake felt his breath catch in his throat. The room had been transformed into something that belonged in a dream rather than a space station. Crystalline formations grew from the walls like frozen lightning, casting rainbow patterns across the floor. The air itself seemed to shimmer with energy that made his skin tingle. This was alien technology at work, reshaping human architecture into something beautiful and strange. At the far end of the hall, 7 different groups of beings waited in formation. Jake recognized them from his studies, but seeing them in person was overwhelming. The Kroger stood like living mountains, their rocky skin gleaming under the strange lights. The Etherians floated above the ground, their translucent bodies rippling like water. Other species filled the space between them, each one more incredible than anything humanity had ever imagined. But Jake's attention was drawn to one group in particular. The Etherians stood with a royal bearing, their blue-tinted skin seeming to glow with internal light. They were humanoid enough that Jake could read some of their expressions, but alien enough that every detail fascinated him. Their silver hair moved without any wind, and their large eyes held intelligence that seemed older than human civilization. One Etherian female stepped forward from the group, and Jake realized she must be royalty from the way the others deferred. To her, she was beautiful in a way that made his chest tighten, with features that were both exotic and somehow familiar. Her violet eyes swept across the human delegation, taking in Ambassador Rodriguez and Dr. Collins before settling on Jake. Moment their eyes met, something strange happened. The Aetherian woman went completely still, her expression changing from diplomatic politeness to something Jake could not identify. She stared at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable, as if she was seeing something that no one else could perceive. The other aliens in the hall began to notice her behavior, and conversations died away into curious silence. Then Princess Kira Velthaner raised her hand and pointed directly at Jake. Her voice carried clearly across the silent hall as she spoke in perfect English to her companions. "There's my husband." The words hit Jake like a physical blow. He felt his face flush red as every being in the room turned to stare at him. Ambassador Rodriguez grabbed his arm, her fingers digging into his uniform sleeve. Dr. Collins dropped his tablet, the device clattering loudly on the crystal floor. The silence stretched on forever as Jake tried to understand what had just happened. Princess Kira began walking toward him with smooth, confident steps. Her fellow Aetherians followed behind her, their expressions showing surprise and excitement. The other alien species began talking among themselves in languages that sounded like music and static and ocean waves. Jake wanted to run, to hide, to wake up from what had to be some kind of nightmare. Ambassador Rodriguez stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over despite her obvious shock. "Your Highness, I believe there may be some translation error. Commander Morrison is not married to anyone." Princess Kira stopped a few feet away from Jake, close enough that he could see the complex patterns of light that moved beneath her blue skin. When she smiled, Jake felt something shift inside his chest, as if his heart had forgotten how to beat properly. "There is no error," Princess Kira said, her voice carrying an accent that made every word sound like poetry. "Among my people, we possess the ability to recognize our soul bond, the one being in all the universe meant to share our life. I have searched for 2 centuries, and now I have found him." She looked directly into Jake's eyes, and he felt as if she could see all. "The way to his soul. I know this must be confusing for you, Jake Morrison of Earth, but what I feel is real, and it is sacred among all the species of the Coalition. You are my destined mate, whether you understand it or not." The hall erupted into chaos as alien voices rose in dozens of languages. Some species seemed excited by this development, while others appeared concerned or angry. Ambassador Rodriguez tried to restore order, while Dr. Collins scrambled to retrieve his tablet and access his cultural databases. Jake stood frozen in the center of it all, staring at the alien princess who claimed he was her husband. His military training told him to stay calm and follow protocol, but no protocol existed for this situation. In one moment, he had gone from being a simple diplomatic representative to the center of an interstellar incident that could change the course of human history. Princess Kira continued to watch him with those incredible violet eyes, waiting for his response to a declaration that would reshape everything he had ever known about his life and his future. The emergency meeting lasted 6 hours and solved nothing. Jake sat in the smaller conference room, while diplomats and alien representatives argued about protocol, cultural law, and the implications of Princess Kira's declaration. His head pounded from listening to translation devices, struggle with concepts that had no equivalent in human language. Every few minutes, someone would ask him a question he could not answer, like whether he felt any mystical connection to the Aetherian princess, or if he had experienced strange dreams lately. Ambassador Rodriguez looked exhausted as she tried to manage 7 different alien viewpoints while keeping Earth's interests protected. The Kroger delegation kept insisting that the soul bond claim was nonsense, while the Aetherians treated it as a cosmic sign that should be respected. The other species fell somewhere between those extremes, each bringing their own cultural baggage to the discussion. Dr. Collins had buried himself in research, his tablet connected to every database Earth possessed about Aetherian culture. He kept muttering about psychic bonds and compatibility matrices, while taking notes faster than Jake could follow. Every time he found something interesting, he would start to explain it to the room, only to be interrupted by another argument. Between the alien delegates, Jake felt like a specimen being studied by scientists. The aliens would look at him, then at Princess Kira, then back at him, as if trying to solve a puzzle that hurt their brains. Princess Kira herself remained calm. Throughout the entire discussion, answering questions about Aetherian mating customs with the patience of someone who had lived for centuries. She explained that soul bonds were rare, even among her people, happening perhaps once in 1,000 years, and that refusing such a bond had never occurred in recorded Aetherian history. When the meeting finally ended, Jake escaped to the stations. Observation deck, needing space to think without alien eyes, watching his every move. The stars looked the same as they always had, but everything else in his life had changed in the span of a few hours. He was 32 years old, had served in the military for 12 years, and thought he understood how the universe worked. Now an alien princess was claiming he was her destined husband, based on mystical psychic abilities that science could not explain. Princess Kira found him there an hour later, moving through the corridors of the human station as if she had lived there all her life. She had changed from her formal diplomatic robes into something simpler, though it still looked like it was made from captured starlight. When she approached, Jake noticed that her skin actually did glow with a soft inner light, and her silver hair moved as if it was underwater instead of in air. "You are troubled," she said, standing beside him at the viewing window. Her voice was gentler now, without the formal tone she had used during the diplomatic meetings. Jake kept looking at the stars rather than at her face. "Wouldn't you be troubled if a stranger announced you were married to them in front of representatives from 7 alien civilizations?" Princess Kira was quiet for a moment, and when Jake glanced at her, he saw something like sadness in her violet eyes. "You think of me as a stranger, but I have been searching for you my entire life. Among my people, the soul bond is not just romantic attraction. It is a recognition of compatibility, so deep that two beings can share thoughts, emotions, even dreams. When I saw you today, I felt a connection stronger than anything I had ever experienced." "That doesn't make sense," Jake said, though he had to admit that something had felt different when their eyes met. "Humans don't have psychic abilities. We barely understand our own emotions, let alone sharing them with aliens." "Perhaps that is why the bond is so strong," Princess Kira replied. "My people have lived for thousands of years with psychic gifts. We often know what others are thinking before they speak, feel their emotions as clearly as our own. It can be overwhelming, like living in a room where everyone is shouting at once. But you are different. Your mind is quiet, peaceful. When I touch the edges of your thoughts, I find calm instead of chaos." Jake turned to look at her directly for the first time since the meeting. "You can read my mind?" "Not read, exactly. It is more like sensing the shape of your thoughts, the color of your emotions. Right now you are afraid, but also curious. You are worried about your duty to your people, but also wondering what it would be like to experience the bond I described." Princess Kira stepped closer, and Jake caught a scent like rain on summer flowers. "You are also attracted to me, though. You try to hide it even from yourself." Jake felt his face burn with embarrassment. Even if that's true, attraction isn't the same thing as love. And marriage is supposed to be a choice made by both people involved. Among humans, yes. But consider this. Your people spent years arranging this meeting with the coalition. They chose you specifically because of your skills, your character, your ability to represent humanity well. Was that truly your choice? Or did circumstances beyond your control bring you to this moment? Princess Kira touched the viewing window with one blue-tinted finger, and Jake saw frost patterns spread across the transparent aluminum. Perhaps some things are meant to be, whether we choose them or not. Over the following days, Princess Kira remained aboard New Geneva Station while her father, Emperor Thane Valfanner, negotiated with Earth's government through subspace communications. Jake found himself spending more time with her, partly because Ambassador Rodriguez thought it was diplomatically necessary, and partly because he was genuinely curious about her world and her people. Princess Kira told him about Etheria, a planet where cities grew like living things and music could reshape matter. She described art forms that existed only in shared dreams and libraries that stored knowledge in crystalline matrices. Her people lived for thousands of years, but they had few children, making each new life precious beyond human understanding. The soul bond was so rare because ether in psychology was complex, and most individuals never found someone whose mind complemented theirs perfectly. In return, Jake told her about Earth, about growing up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else, about choosing military service because he wanted to protect people, about the dreams he had harbored since childhood of exploring the stars. Princess Kira listened with fascination to stories that seemed ordinary to him, asking questions about human customs and emotions that he had never thought to examine. During one of their conversations in the station's hydroponics garden, Princess Kira demonstrated her psychic abilities by making the flowers bloom faster and the vines grow in impossible spirals. Jake watched in amazement as she reshaped living plants with nothing but focused thought. "Could you teach me to do that?" he asked. Princess Kira smiled, and Jake realized it was the first completely happy expression he had seen from her. "Perhaps. The bond makes many things possible that would normally be impossible. But it requires trust, a willingness to open your mind to another being completely." "That sounds terrifying," Jake admitted. "It is," Princess Kira agreed. "But it is also beautiful beyond description. To know another person so completely that you understand their thoughts before they form them, to feel their joy as your own, to never be truly alone again, these are gifts worth any risk." Jake found himself thinking about her words long after their conversations ended. He began to notice things about Princess Kira that went beyond her alien beauty, the way she listened to other people with complete attention, the gentle humor in her observations about human behavior, the sadness that appeared in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. She was intelligent, kind, and surprisingly vulnerable despite her royal status and psychic powers. But the political situation was becoming more complicated every day. Some members of the coalition saw the potential soul bond as a positive development that could strengthen ties between species. Others, particularly the Kroger, viewed it as suspicious and potentially dangerous. There were rumors that extremist factions on Earth opposed any deep alliance with alien species, and Jake began to worry that his personal situation might endanger the larger diplomatic mission. The crisis came to a head when Ambassador Rodriguez received new orders from Earth's government. Jake was to return home immediately for debriefing, and all negotiations with the coalition were to be suspended pending a full review of the soul bond situation. The message made it clear that some people in power viewed Princess Kira's claim as a form of alien manipulation designed to control human policy. Jake read the orders in Ambassador Rodriguez's office while Princess Kira waited in the corridor outside. Through the transparent door, he could see her standing perfectly still, her expression calm, but her silver hair moving more rapidly than usual, a sign of emotional distress he had learned to recognize. "What are you going to do?" "Ambassador," Rodriguez asked. Jake looked at the orders again, then at Princess Kira, then back at the orders. For the first time in his military career, he was not sure he could follow the commands he had been given. Everything he had been taught about duty and service pulled him toward the shuttle that would take him back to Earth. But something else, something he was only beginning to understand, made him want to stay and discover what the soul bond might really mean. Jake made his decision the next morning when he woke up from the most vivid dream of his life. In the dream, he had been standing on a beach made of crystal sand while two suns set over an ocean that reflected purple and gold. Princess Kira had been there beside him, and when she touched his hand, he could feel her thoughts mixing with his own like streams of water flowing together. The sensation had been strange, but not frightening, more like discovering a part of himself he had never known existed. He dressed in his uniform and went to find Ambassador Rodriguez, who was in her office trying to manage communications with both Earth and the Coalition representatives. She looked up when he entered, and Jake could see the stress of the past week written in the lines around her eyes. "I'm not going back to Earth," he said without preamble. "Not yet." Ambassador Rodriguez leaned back in her chair. "Jake, you can't. Just ignore direct orders from the Joint Chiefs. Your military career will be over." "Maybe my military career needs to be over," Jake replied, surprising himself with the words. "I've spent 12 years following orders and serving my country, and I'm proud of that service. But this situation is bigger than military protocol. If I leave now, the Coalition talks will collapse, and humanity will lose its best chance at joining the galactic community. And if you stay, you might be walking into some kind of alien mind control," Ambassador Rodriguez pointed out. "The specialists back on Earth are convinced that Princess Kira is using psychic manipulation to influence your decisions." Jake had been thinking about that possibility for days. It would be easy to blame his growing feelings for Princess Kira on alien mental powers beyond his understanding. But when he examined his emotions honestly, they felt completely real and completely his own. "I don't think she's controlling my mind. I think she's showing me parts of my mind I never knew were there." Before Ambassador Rodriguez could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed red as the public address system announced that all personnel should report to emergency stations. Jake and the ambassador rushed to the command center, where they found organized chaos as officers tried to understand what was happening. Captain Roy Henderson was standing at the main display screen, watching sensor readings that showed multiple unknown contacts approaching the station at high speed. "We've got 12 ships incoming, configuration unknown but definitely not friendly. They're jamming our communications and charging weapons." Dr. Collins rushed into the command center with his tablet clutched against his chest. "It's the Kroger extremist faction. Princess Kira just told me they've been planning this for weeks. They want to destroy the Coalition talks before any human-Etherian alliance can form." Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Where is Princess Kira now?" "Deck 7, Section C," Dr. Collins replied. "She's trying to establish psychic contact with her father's fleet, but the Kroger jamming is interfering with her abilities." Jake was moving before he made a conscious decision to do so, running through corridors filled with crew members heading to battle stations. The station's defensive systems were powering up around him, but he knew that New Geneva Station had been built for diplomacy, not warfare. Against 12 attacking ships, their chances were not good. He found Princess Kira in a meditation chamber she had been using during her stay on the station. She was kneeling on the floor with her eyes closed, her blue skin glowing brighter than he had ever seen before. Sweat beaded on her forehead, despite the cool temperature, and her silver hair moved in agitated patterns around her face. "I cannot reach them," she said without opening her eyes. "The Kroger technology blocks my psychic abilities at this distance." Jake knelt beside her, not sure what he could do to help, but unable to leave her alone. "What do they want?" "To kill us both," Princess Kira replied with simple directness. "The extremists believe that any alliance between humans and Etherians will dilute the purity of both species. They would rather see the Coalition destroyed then allow what they call contamination. The station shook as the first weapon struck its shields. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows across a meditation chamber, while the sound of distant explosions echoed through the hull. Jake could hear Captain Henderson's voice over the communication system, coordinating defensive fire and damage. Control efforts. Princess Kira opened her violet eyes and looked directly at Jake. I need to tell you something before we die. The soul bond is real, but it is not complete. What I felt when I saw you was recognition, the potential for a connection deeper than anything either of our species has experienced before. But the bond itself must be chosen by both partners. It cannot be forced or faked. And why did you announce that I was your husband? Jake asked. Because I hoped, Princess Kira said, reaching out to take his hand. I hoped that if you understood what was possible between us, you might choose to explore it. Among my people, hope is considered a form of courage. Jake felt her fingers intertwine with his, and suddenly the chaos around them seemed less important than the woman kneeling beside him. What would it mean if I chose the soul bond? It would mean sharing everything. Thoughts, emotions, dreams, fears. It would mean never being truly alone again, but also never being able to hide from another person. It would mean becoming something new, something that has never existed before in the galaxy. The station shook again, more violently this time. Through the meditation chamber's viewing port, Jake could see flashes of weapons fire and the dark shapes of Kroger ships moving against the stars. In a few more minutes, the station's shields would fail, and everyone aboard would die. Would it help us survive what's happening out there? Jake asked. Princess Kira nodded. The bond would allow us to coordinate in ways that no enemy could predict or counter. But Jake, you must choose for the right reasons. Not from fear or duty, but because you truly want to share your life with me. Jake looked into her alien eyes and realized that the choice had already been made, somewhere deep in his heart during the conversations and shared moments of the past week. He was attracted to her beauty, fascinated by her intelligence, and moved by her vulnerability. More than that, he was curious about the connection she described, the possibility of experiencing consciousness in a completely new way. I choose. The bond, he said. Princess Kira smiled, and Jake felt something shift in the space between them, as if the air itself had become charged with electricity. She placed her other hand against his forehead, and suddenly Jake could feel her mind touching his own. The sensation was overwhelming at first, like diving into an ocean of light and color and emotion. He could feel Princess Kira's thoughts mixing with his own, her memories becoming accessible to him, her emotions flowing through him like music. But instead of losing himself in the experience, Jake found that his consciousness became sharper, more focused than it had ever been before. Through the bond, he could sense the positions of every ship in the battle outside, could feel the tactical situation as clearly as if he was looking at a three-dimensional map. Princess Kira's psychic abilities flowed through their connection, giving him awareness that extended far beyond normal human senses. Now we fight, Princess Kira said, though Jake realized he had heard the words in his mind rather than with his ears. They ran together through the station's corridors, their movements perfectly synchronized without any need for spoken communication. Jake could feel Princess Kira's knowledge of Kroger battle tactics flowing into his thoughts, while she gained access to his military training and strategic experience. In the command center, Captain Henderson was coordinating a desperate defense against superior numbers. The station's weapons were designed for police actions, not military engagements, and the Kroger ships were systematically destroying the defensive systems. Jake burst into the command center with Princess Kira beside him, his mind already formulating a battle plan that combined human tactical innovation with ether and psychic coordination. For the first time since the attack began, He felt hope that they might actually survive. "Captain Henderson," Jake said, his voice carrying an authority he had never possessed before. "I need you to trust me. We're going to try something that's never been done before." Henderson looked at Jake's face and apparently saw something there that convinced him. "What do you need?" "Complete tactical control," Jake replied. "And Princess Kira needs access to the station's communication array." As the battle raged around them, Jake began to discover what the soul bond truly meant and what humans and Aetherians might become when they chose to face the universe together. Jake stood at the tactical display while the station shook around him from repeated Kroger weapon strikes. Through his bond with Princess Kira, he could see the battle with senses no human had ever possessed before. Each enemy ship appeared in his mind as a distinct pattern of energy and intention, their movements predictable once he understood their tactical doctrine. "The Kroger fight like a pack of hunters," he said to Captain Henderson while his fingers danced across the control interface. "They use overwhelming force to paralyze their prey, then move in for the kill. But they expect their targets to react with fear." Princess Kira stood beside the communication array, her eyes closed in concentration as she tried to pierce the jamming that prevented them from calling for help. Sweat beaded on her blue skin from the effort, but Jake could feel her determination through their mental connection. She was drawing strength from his confidence, while her psychic abilities enhanced his tactical awareness beyond anything he had thought possible. "We're going to do something they won't expect," Jake continued, making rapid adjustments to the station's defensive systems. "Instead of trying to hold them off, we're going to make them think we're more dangerous than we actually are." "Captain." Henderson looked skeptical as he watched Jake work. "How do we convince 12 warships that a diplomatic station is a threat?" "By making them believe we have reinforcements coming," Jake replied. He turned to the communications officer. "Lieutenant Barnes, I need you to broadcast fake transponder signals on rotating frequencies. Make it look like a fleet of Earth defense. 4 ships just dropped out of hyperspace on the far side of the system." Through the soul bond, Jake felt Princess Kira's approval of his plan. She was using her psychic abilities to enhance the deception, making the fake signals feel more real to any Kroger psychic sensors. The Kroger were not naturally psychic like the Aetherians, but their technology included captured psychic amplifiers that could detect mental patterns across space. "Got it," Lieutenant Barnes reported, broadcasting now. On the tactical display, Jake watched the Kroger formation hesitate as their sensors detected what appeared to be incoming human reinforcements. The enemy ships began to spread out, preparing to face a 2-front battle instead of simply destroying a helpless station. "Princess Kira now," Jake said aloud, though he knew she could feel his thoughts directly. Princess Kira opened her violet eyes and placed both hands on the communication console. Her natural glow intensified until she seemed to be made of living starlight, and Jake felt power flowing through their bond, unlike anything he had ever experienced. She was using their connection to amplify her psychic abilities far beyond their normal range. "I have contact with the Coalition fleet," she announced, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in Jake's bones. "My father's ships are 2 hours away, but I can make the Kroger believe they are much closer." Jake felt her pushing false images into the minds of the Kroger commanders. Visions of massive Aetherian warships emerging from hyperspace. Weapons charging, overwhelming force, preparing to crush the extremist fleet. The deception was so vivid that even Jake could sense it through their bond, though he knew it was not real. The effect on the Kroger formation was immediate. 3 ships broke off their attack runs and began moving toward the fake reinforcement. Signals. 2 more started charging their hyperspace drives, preparing to retreat. Only the flagship and its closest escorts continued pressing their attack on the station. "It's working," Captain Henderson said with amazement. "They're falling back." But Jake could feel through Princess Kira that the deception would not hold much longer. The Kroger flagship commander was more experienced than the others, and he was beginning to suspect that the psychic images were false. In a few more minutes, he would rally his scattered fleet and renew the attack with even greater fury. "We need to end this now," Jake said. He turned to face the bridge crew, seeing fear and hope warring in their expressions. "I'm going to do something that might get us all killed, but it's our only chance." Through their bond, Jake felt Princess Kira's immediate understanding of his plan. She also felt her terror at what he was proposing, because she knew better than anyone what the risks would be. "Jake, no," she said, speaking aloud so the others could hear. "If you channel that much power through our bond, it could destroy your mind. And if I don't, we'll all be dead in 10 minutes anyway," Jake replied. He moved to the tactical control station and began entering commands that would route the station's entire power grid through a single weapon system. "Princess Kira, I need you to link our bond to the station's main computer. Make it an extension of our shared consciousness." Captain Henderson stepped forward, his face pale with concern. "Commander Morrison, what exactly are you planning?" Jake looked at the tactical display where the Kroger flagship was moving into. "Positioned for a final devastating attack. I'm going to show them what happens when humans and Aetherians work together." Princess Kira moved to the central computer core, her hands hovering over interfaces that had never been designed for psychic manipulation. "Jake, this is beyond dangerous. No one has ever tried to merge biological consciousness with artificial intelligence through a soul bond. The feedback could kill us both. Then we better make sure it works," Jake said with a confidence he did not entirely feel. He placed his hands on the tactical controls while Princess Kira established her connection to the station's computer systems. Through their bond, Jake felt her mind expanding to encompass databases and sensor arrays and weapon targeting systems. The sensation was like watching someone become a living spaceship, their consciousness spreading through kilometers of corridors. And machinery but the process was flowing both ways. Jake found his tactical awareness expanding beyond anything he had dreamed possible. He could feel every system on the station as if it was part of his own body. More than that, he could sense the Kroger ships with perfect clarity, understanding their weaknesses and blind spots as thoroughly as if he had designed them himself. The station's main weapon was a defensive PLASMA cannon designed to destroy asteroids and space debris. Under normal circumstances, it would barely scratch the armor of a Kroger warship. But with Princess Kira's psychic abilities, channeling power through their bond, and Jake's tactical knowledge guiding the targeting, it became something entirely different. Jake felt the weapon charging, its energy building to levels that made the station's hull vibrate like a struck bell. Through the bond, he could sense Princess Kira's strain as she maintained the connection between their consciousness and the station's systems. Her alien physiology was better adapted to psychic stress than his human brain, but even she had limits. "Firing," Jake announced, though he was not sure if he spoke the word aloud or simply thought it. The plasma cannon discharged with a brilliance that turned the main view screen white. But this was not ordinary plasma. It was energy infused with psychic force, guided by superhuman precision, and powered by the combined will of two beings, whose consciousness had temporarily merged with advanced technology. The blast struck the Kroger flagship dead center, and Jake felt the enemy ship's death through sensors that had become extensions of his own nervous system. The explosion was beautiful and terrible, a flower of fire blooming against the stars. The remaining Kroger ships fled immediately, their formation scattered and their morale broken. Jake watched them disappear into hyperspace while feeling a satisfaction deeper than any victory he had achieved in his military career. But the effort had cost them both dearly. Jake felt Princess Kira's consciousness fragmenting as the strain of maintaining their expanded bond became too much for even her extraordinary abilities. Through their connection, he experienced her pain as if it was his own, felt her thoughts becoming confused and disconnected. "Kira," he said, reaching for her as she collapsed beside the computer console. She looked up at him with eyes that seemed to hold swirling galaxies. "The bond," she whispered. "It's too strong. I cannot control it." Jake realized with growing horror that their psychic connection was spinning out of control. What had begun as a beautiful merging of consciousness was becoming a dangerous feedback loop that threatened to destroy their individual identities. He could feel his own thoughts becoming lost in the vast ocean of Princess Kira's ancient memories and alien experiences as the station's crew celebrated their victory around them. Jake and Princess Kira fought a different battle, the struggle to remain themselves while forces beyond their understanding tried to merge them into something that might be more than human or etherian, or might be nothing at all. Captain Henderson knelt beside them, his face filled with concern. "Medical team to the bridge," he called over the communication system. "Emergency situation." But Jake knew that no human medical technology could help them now. They had ventured into uncharted territory where consciousness and technology and psychic power intersected in ways that no one had ever studied or understood. Their survival would depend on finding a way to control forces that were fundamentally beyond control. Through their chaotic bond, Jake felt Princess Kira's love for him, her fear for both their lives, and her desperate hope that what they had created